Yeah. Okay, Bobita, you can start.
Okay. A very warm welcome to all. Thank you for joining our this international webinar on languages of Northeast India, organized by Department of Linguistics, Assam Universities, and in collaborations with NEI. In this session on linguistics ecology of Northeast India, we have with us a distinguished linguist known for his extensive research on ecolinguistics, then linguistic landscaping, deep multilingualism on, and Northeast Indian linguistics. So he has also authored and edited many books, both at the national and international publications. Joining us today for plenary talk is Professor Sailendra Kumar Singh, Department of Linguistics, NEHU, Shillong. We welcome you, sir, and we are looking forward to a talk titled Linguistic Habitat of Northeast India. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Bobita, for introducing me. It's my pleasure. The topic of my talk is linguistic habitat of Northeast India. So let me begin with a very simple definition and why I have chosen this term. So
yes, sir.
Linguistic habitat means basically, or the linguistic habitat of Northeast India basically means Northeast India as a space or place where languages make their home. Where languages make their home. And intentionally, I have chosen this topic because considering the present prevailing situation of Corona, we all are at home. Am I right? And considering the present situation, we are at home and we have to maintain the social distancing. So home becomes very important. I request all of you to be at home. Don't go outside. Stay safe. So linguistic habitat basically refers to the space or the place where languages make their home. But you can ask me a question, what does it mean basically? And if you ask me a question, what does it mean? I will simply say this is basically environmental conditions in which languages of Northeast inhabit and survive. Two very important things. The languages of Northeast inhabit and survive, and therefore those languages need to inhabit and need to survive. So there are two things in condition: they are surviving and they are living, but also they need to, and therefore the task of linguists become very, very important. But in general, the term habitat comes from environmental science, and this is basically usually used for animal, plants that live in a particular condition or in a specific environment. But then you can ask me, what is the need to take up this topic today? Friends, let me tell you, the notion of linguistic habitat becomes very, very important in the present situation, basically in the present, prevailing situation in the Corona call, whatever you want to call it, and we all are suffering. So where, we have to have a different kind of interactions which may take place. We don't know where we are leading toward. Now, but then what does it mean? Basically is that when I say linguistic habitat of Northeast India, we need to underline or identify languages which are very typical, which are very specific to the Northeast India. But then you can ask me a question, what are the languages which can be called very typical or very specific to Northeast region? Now, so it requires a kind of holistic perspective. It's not one-way traffic. It requires a holistic perspective and also democratic perspective. That means three things have to be identified, or three things have to be understood. And that is why I'm saying it is democratic. That means of, for, and why. I would say when we talk about linguistic habitat of Northeast India, we need to underline three things. The first thing is linguistic habitat of Northeast for India linguistic habitat. Or on the other hand, India's linguistic habitat for Northeast India. And the third one, linguistic habitat by Northeast and India in particular. So basically, we are talking about of, for, and by. Therefore, the notion of habitat becomes very democratic in that sense. But friends, we need to also understand the specific situation of Northeast India at one hand, and the pan-Indian linguistic habitat on the other hand. Therefore, what needs to be understood is that we to identify those factors which will be very specific to Northeast India, and those factors that need to be taken into consideration considering the pan-Indian situation. Now, so what happens? We need to divide linguistic habitat into two basic categories to bring the holistic and democratic perspective. The one is the Northeast discourse or Northeast linguistic discourse at one hand. On the other hand, the pan-Indian linguistic discourse. This term has to be underlined and has to be understood properly, because we need to differentiate. We need to differentiate the Northeast India discourse, which is very specific in the Northeast Indian context, and the pan-Indian discourse, which is covering all, in which Northeast India also comes in. Now, if that is the case, when we are talking about discourse, we need to come down. Who are they who initiate the discourse? Basically, who will encode the discourse and also decode the discourse. Therefore, we need to identify the local discourse community. The local discourse community of Northeast India. On the other hand, we need to identify the pan-Indian discourse community in which the people of Northeast India are also part and parcel of that. But when it becomes that means basically we are trying to understand linguistic habitat from two perspectives. One is at the micro level. On the other hand, in pan-Indian context, at the macro level. So it should be very clear. If we want to have holistic approach of linguistic habitat of Northeast India, we need to understand at the micro level on one hand and at the macro level on the other hand. So at the micro level, what comes? At the micro level, Northeast India discourse, the theme, the topic, so and so forth. But we need to identify the local discourse community of Northeast India. On the other hand, the pan-Indian discourse community at the micro level. But the something which is important, and as a student of linguistics, we have to identify what are the forces, what are the forces. And if we identify those forces, then only we will be able to understand the linguistic habitat of Northeast India. And I'm trying to introduce this concept, which is not very popular, but of course it is in literature nowadays, for understanding the alternative sociolinguistic reality of Northeast India. So what is important here is to identify the basic forces which are involved in that. And therefore, I would like to identify two basic forces. One is centrifugal forces at the micro level, at the Northeast Indian context, centrifugal forces. And that is very important. And that is very unique in the Northeast Indian context. Those centrifugal forces are diversity, is the D factor, you can call it D factor, that is diversity, divergence, and differences, or the something which is very distinct in that sense. So at the micro level, we need to identify Northeast India discourse, the theme, the content, the topic, the field on the one hand first, and then the local discourse community. And the third, which is very important, what are the forces operating? And this forces is basically the D factor forces, that is diversity, divergence, and differences. Friends, on the other hand, in the pan-Indian context, we are basically trying to identify the C factor. That is something very important. The C factor becomes very important in the pan-Indian context. And then only we will be able to understand, the notion of linguistic habitat in a very democratic and holistic manner. So this C factor is basically commonness, the something which is common among all Indian languages. We are trying to identify the pan-Indian factors. Then convergence, which is just opposite of. So these forces at the micro level, when we are talking about a pan-Indian community, pan-Indian discourse community, or pan-Indian discourse, basically we are discussing about centripetal forces. So two forces are in the North Asian context, we are talking about centrifugal forces. At the pan-Indian context, we are talking about centripetal forces. So in that, C factors become very important, that is commonness, convergence, and cohesiveness. These are three basic mantras. For the centrifugal forces, D factors become very important. For the centripetal forces, the C factors become very important. Now, you can ask me a question: what is the relevance of this in the present context, or where do we go from here? Now, if you look at, friends, what do we do and where do we go from here? So if you look at the linguistic habitat in the pan-Indian context, what happens, which is very important in the pan-Indian context, linguistically, as we all know, we can identify Indo-Aryan speech community or Indo-Aryan discourse community. Dravidian discourse community, Tibeto-Burman discourse community, and Austroasiatic discourse community. But these are linguistically identified, but this can be also geographically identified and located in the Indian context, because we do have a specific reason or the place or the space for the Aryan speech communities, Dravidian, Tibeto-Burman, and so as Austroasiatic. And so as also, if we identify the Northeast India, this also had a proper geographical location in that sense. But then why this is important to understand from the pan-Indian perspective, and also from the micro level, because we need to understand the linguistic ethos of this country. And unless we understand that, we may need to understand Northeast India in particular. So friends, let me give a very brief description of the pan-Indian context, and then I will come to Northeast Indian context and try to understand why the notion of linguistic habitat has become so important to understand the alternative sociolinguistic reality. So what happens if you look at the 2011 census? Something which is very unique is that total 19,569 mother tongues were identified. That is called raw return data. I mean, there may be objection, they are not full-proofed mother tongues, but that is called, the term which is given in census is basically a raw return of the mother tongue. And that, look at the number, 19,569. My God. So it's almost touching 20,000. And that is why we are so proud of, the. So 19,569 raw return of mother tongues. And in that, 1,369 were classified as rationalized mother tongue. Look at the situation. And unless we talk about those numbers, we may not be able to do justice towards understanding the linguistic habitat of Northeast India. Because unless we talk about the pan-Indian context, we may not be able to understand the Northeast India even at the micro level. We cannot talk about the local discourse community unless we talk about these numbers. So rationalized mother tongue numbers, just 1,369. 1,369 means 1,369. Look at one hand, 19,569 raw return, and it was rationalized only 1,369, whereas it's called not rationalized. Very difficult to give definition. Means which was not rationalized, only 1,474. Only 1,474. What happens in India? We often talk about the issues of mother tongue, identification, categorization, differentiation, so and so. But we forget to take into consideration of these numbers which are authentic because it has come from particular sources which is considered to be authentic. Now, if we combine that, both the rationalized and not rationalized, what happens? The total number reaches almost 2,843. It reaches 2,843. That means, friends, look at why I'm saying we need to identify the local discourse community. Why I'm saying this? And they are maximum in Northeast India. Therefore, the rest, which is not counted at all, maybe, are 16,726, means left out. Neither in rationalized or not rationalized, some of them maybe, but that category, since it was on the basis of 10,000 number of speakers, we don't know. We need to identify. But what is important to understand here is that these numbers matter a lot when we are talking about the Northeast India linguistic habitat. So let's keep these numbers in mind and come to Northeast India and why. Then you can ask me a question, or even I will be try to defend myself why the notion of linguistic habitat becomes very important. So where are these numbers? Where are these languages, mother tongues? I'm not talking about mother tongue. I'm not talking about languages in that sense. Where are they? Maybe in Northeast India, maybe in Indo-Aryan region, maybe in the Dravidian, maybe in the Tiptobarian area, maybe in the Austroasiatic, so on and so forth. So the natural habitat of India in general and natural habitat of Northeast India in particular can be divided into three major categories, and that is ethnonomically, polytonomically, and toponomically. This description, one can see in my book Multilingualism, where I have talked about these three major categories. This category has been discussed by many scholars, but becomes very important in the Indian context. So natural habitat characterized by natural environment, and for that we need to identify three things: ethnonomically, polytonomically, and toponomically. So ethnonomically, what happens with the natural habitat of the natural environment, the language we are situated ethnically, the natural, from where they are. On the other hand, if we look at Northeast India, politically, polytony means political unit, and toponymy means the geographical unit, and ethnonomically means the ethnic unit. So polytonomically, there are 8 states in Northeast India. Am I right? I think all of you agree. There is nothing wrong. And those are Assam, Arunachal Pradesh. First will be Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Tripura. No doubt about that. These are political units also, because it's a states of the government, it's a state of the country. And so as toponomically, because it has definite geographical area. So polytonomically and toponomically, there are 8 units. So Northeast India linguistic habitat can be divided into 8 polytonomical and toponomical linguistic biomes. And even we can further subclassify into sublinguistic habitat ecosystem. It is possible. It is always possible to identify in subunits. Now the question is, what do we do and where do we go from here? So friends, something which is very important to understand is to identify or preserve the linguistic resources, the linguistic diversity of this region, the Northeast linguistic region. Now, you can ask me a question why I'm saying I'm talking about the resources. Resources becomes very important because many of the languages, or if you look at the linguistic habitat, the natural linguistic habitat of Northeast India, and try to understand in the division between scheduled languages and non-scheduled languages, it becomes very important. Now, if you recall the discussion, according to the census of India, total 19,569 mother tongues were, but it is reduced to 22 scheduled languages and 99 non-scheduled languages. Am I right? All of you agree? According to 2011 census, 22 scheduled languages and 99 non-scheduled languages. But in that context, Northeast India becomes very important because here there are many states where non-scheduled languages are in majority. Non-scheduled languages are in majority, and scheduled languages are in minority. Let me begin with one example, and let's talk about all the states and see the distribution of languages in terms of scheduled languages and non-scheduled languages. So Arunachal Pradesh, what happens? There's something which is very interesting here. The percentage of scheduled languages in Arunachal Pradesh is just 27.87%. In Arunachal Pradesh, why local discourse is important, and why the local discourse community is important, and why those D factors are important? Because of the distribution of languages in the Northeast region. Look at the diversity, look at the divergence, look at the differences. So in Arunachal Pradesh, 27.87% are scheduled languages, and more than 72% are non-scheduled languages. That means Arunachal Pradesh is the state in India where non-scheduled languages, more than the percentage of non-scheduled language, more than the scheduled languages. On the other hand, Assam, it gives a different picture altogether, where the scheduled languages happens to be almost 93%, 92.78%, and the non-scheduled languages happens to be 7.22%. Look at Manipur, which is very interesting. Again, the scheduled languages happens to be 58.20%, and non-scheduled languages again 41.80%. It's sometimes balancing the scheduled languages and non-scheduled languages in Manipur, but in Meghalaya, this is again it gives a different picture. 14.65, 15% languages, 50%, the scheduled 50% populations belong to scheduled languages, and non-scheduled languages almost 85.35%. Something very unique. On the other hand, Mizoram, very interesting picture. Mizoram, 12.35% scheduled languages and 87.65% non-scheduled languages. And that is why I'm saying we need to identify the, uniqueness of the Northeast India. On the other hand, Nagaland also 11.87% scheduled languages and 88.13 non-scheduled languages. Sikkim, on the other hand, presents a different kind of picture, that is 73.64% scheduled languages and 26% 26.36% non-scheduled languages. Tripura, almost 70% scheduled languages and around 30% non-scheduled languages. Friends, you can ask me a question. It is available, but what is the need to explain this? Because it has meaning here. Look at here the states: Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland. These are the states where the languages, the non-scheduled languages are in majority and the scheduled languages are in minority. But this contradicts the all India situation, because in India, what happens? Almost 96.71% population belong to scheduled languages and only 3.29% non-scheduled languages. Can you see the paradigm shift which is taking place in terms of distribution of languages? And that makes Northeast India very special, unique. And therefore, friends, we need to talk about the D factors, that is divergence, diversity, and distinctiveness. But again, here there are many states. Example, Arunachal, Nagaland, and states where English happens to be the official language. In Meghalaya also, English happens to be the official language. And that uniqueness has to be underlined. The point, something which is very important, is that we need to summarize. And you can ask me a question at the end. What is the basic characteristics of Northeast India linguistically, sociolinguistically, social psychologically, and even anthropologically, culturally, so on and so forth. And the linguistic habitat becomes very important. Friends, let me tell you very honestly, it's the evening time. So whatever I will say, I will explain the truth. मैं जो कहूंगा सच कहूंगा, सच के सिवा कुछ भी नहीं कहूंगा, है ना? Babita, am I right? Keep on smiling. This is a very tough time. We have to smile also. So friends, linguistic habitat can bring unexpected finding. The study of linguistic habitat can bring unexpected finding, which may not be possible to bring those issues if you look at from the Western perspective or from the rigid sociolinguistics factor. So we need to, in India, the something which is very important to understand the linguistic space where languages are spoken, and how these languages survive in the context of complex context situation. So we need to have social psychological perspective of Northeast Indian linguistic studies. But the something which is very important, and that has to be underlined, is that the study of linguistic habitat raises basically unexpected questions, which you may not have heard about this. Unexpected questions concerning the relations between the languages of Northeast India. And in that context, the notion of mutual intelligibility, in that context, the notion of embedded multilingualism becomes very, very important. So are we ready to understand the societal factors Are we ready to understand the social biological factors or the social biological foundation of languages in Northeast India? And if we want to go ahead, I think the study of linguistic habitat becomes very, very important. But what has happened is that we are so accustomed to take the so-called rigid the Western theories, and then so we have tendency of neglecting those things. I'm not saying what I am giving is the something new, but what I'm trying to say is that let's have another perspective, the alternative perspective in the 21st century, and especially in the context of post COVID-19 linguistic world order. Because let me tell you, maybe we have to, this is an era of social distancing, and many other factors will play important role. So are we ready? The question which I'm posing in front of you, are we ready to take departure from the Western intellectual inquiry? Are we ready? Are we willing to do that? If not, I would like to stimulate all of you. Yes, please come forward and look for the departure. If something new in the Indian context, let's try to. So apart from drawing attention to some important new findings about linguistic habitat of India, we need to have a fresh look on linguistic space of Northeast India, which might play a fundamental role in transferring India into a global knowledge hub. And that is what the new education policy says. The new language, the new education policy says the basic goal of new education policy is to transform India into global knowledge hub. And for that, the so-called the vocal for local becomes very important. Friends, why I'm bringing this, the notion of linguistic habitat and the notion of the so-called local discourse community, because you need to speak. It's not that Salient Singh has to speak. Is the Babita, is the Monali, is the many of you, they have to speak and come forward with a very good voice. And I'm sure that voice can reach, and even that voice can become a radical. But the question is the something which is very, very important, and that has to be understood, is that, we need to describe all aspects. It may not be possible at this juncture. Maybe I need, maybe 2 or 3 hours to highlight all those things. But I'm sure I'm given just 40 minutes. Am I right? And almost I'm approaching, but I have to say something more. So let's even a few in it pointers can be highlighted. So what is important is that ethno-archaeological issues have to be. That will the archaeological scheme, the architect, and geography. So what I'm saying, which is very important, and I think Monali should highlight, in the coming discourse and all, archaeological scheme of Northeast India linguistic ecology, an architect. And you can ask him question, what is this archaeological scheme, architect, and geography, so and so forth? Because if we want to build own environment linguistic ecology of Northeast India, we have to go back and look at from where, the question of where. And friends, let me tell you, everywhere and every time this question is embedded with the language from where it comes. And that is a very basic issue in Northeast Indian linguistic habitat. So a study of domestic, this is something, the point, the study of domestic and public space has to be explored. And therefore, the relation, the dichotomy between nature and culture has to be established. And therefore, the notion of ethnoecology becomes very, very important. So friends, I request all of you to raise this question, and that is where from and where to. Now, from where languages in Northeast India are. Because when we are talking about English, which has become a major link language, from where it has come? It hasn't. It came only in the colonial era. Am I right? From where it has come? Whereas many other Tipto-Burman languages came from other parts. So this where from we need to understand, and where to leadings towards, and then how do we protect our own language. So these two questions need to be highlighted: where from and where to. Means where is the way, where is the way, and how do we reach. So the basic point that needs to be highlighted in the present context, and let me summarize, is that, friends, and I think Babita from the chair, she can agree with me or not, I'm not sure, but I'm sure she can smile at least. Am I right? So what we have to do is that, in the present situation, we need to strengthen the indigenous capability. We need to strengthen the indigenous capability to create knowledge ecology. And if that is done, that could be something very unique for the Northeast India, because the maximum diversity, linguistic diversity, maximum biolinguistic diversity exists in this part of the country. Am I right? So the mantra which I'm giving, what we have to do, where do we go from here? We need to strengthen the indigenous capability, not the hired one. No, enough is enough. Let's have its own. So I'm saying the indigenous capability to create own knowledge ecology. That will be mine, and that is why the vocal for the local becomes very important. And therefore, Northeast India will become more inclusive as well. Therefore, what is important here is that, why I'm talking about linguistic habitat, for the one reason is that we have to create optimism among local languages. Am I right? No more, the passive attitude, no, what will happen, why my language is all, and you must have seen how many languages are given the tag of endangered languages, so and so. I am not sure. I am never happy with those tags. My language is endangered, so and so forth. Even once upon a time, Khasi was given, that tag that Khasi is an endangered language, but again it was removed. How it can happen only in 2 years that one language was endangered and then it becomes safe language? That means something which is very important is that the young generation or young linguists like all of you have to create optimism among local languages, and it's imperative. It's not optional, it has to be. Therefore, we need to inspire new involvement and connecting people. Therefore, what is important is that we need to develop human excellence in local language. Human excellence in the local language. Unless we empower our own language, mother tongue, it's not possible to have knowledge always, good knowledge in another language. So prepare our students with independent thinking in own language. Can we do that? Now, the task of linguists become, much more comprehensive and much more challenging here. It's not simply describing the language, it's not simply documenting the language, but now the new role, which is more challenging, is that we need to prepare our students with indigenous thinking in own language. Who can do that? And if somebody can do, could be the real linguist, and therefore create sustainability in the, or the create a sense of, inclusiveness own people and among the indigenous people. Therefore, the something which is very important, and we need to highlight that, Northeast India is something very, very important for all of us. And here, the indigenous knowledge through local languages, folk knowledge, and the people knowledge become very, very important. And with these words, I thank you all. Jai Bharat, Jai Northeast, and all of you be happy. Okay, good. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Babita,
Thank you very
to
much. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your such an extremely informative sessions, and which really makes us feel real researchers in a way. And as you have said, human excellence in local language is something which we have to be focused more, and we hope that we can put up this in our mind. And sir, as you have said, query is that to certain states, especially in the context of Northeast language, as there are no balance with the scheduled and non-scheduled languages in numbers. So I think the attitudes is also one factors which we should motivate from the speech community to further work on, the bring up their very languages. At some point of time, some non-scheduled language are at the verge of extinction. So many languages till dates, especially Northeast, there are many languages which, say, from the context of Manipur, there are many language people think it as a language, but in fact, as a dialect of a language, but in fact, they seems to be mutually unintelligible. And there are certain languages where, when we do not take it up at this present context, it might lead to leading to the part of language loss. And this is something a very alarming situation in the context of Manipur, sir. And I do think that in other states of Northeast India, we have to look into this. Any comments on that, sir?
Yes, very, very, very important point that you have raised, that this has to be looked into, and attitude plays very, very important role. Uh, Attitude plays very, very important role. Unless we have positive attitude towards own language, it is very difficult, to work for own language. Now, what is important here is that the knowledge we hire, basically, it comes from different languages. So in order to have a strong nation, it has to have a strong languages also. So in that concept, it is the responsibility or duty of all of us to, strengthen own language, or the mother tongue. Therefore, the indigenous knowledge has to be created. That is what my basic message is here.
Thank you very much, sir. And any questions from the participants?
How many participants, total participants?
Altogether, we have 15.
No, Bobita, it's 21.
21 is coming.
Oh.
Yeah, it's 21.
Okay,
Good number.
may I come in?
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, please.
Vijen.
Okay, good evening, sir. That was a wonderful presentation on the overall picture of the ecology of Northeast India. Sir, I have two very quick query. The first one is, as you explained already also, Northeast has a very typical language ecology from the pan-India. So in order to avoid the distortion of this typical ecology of Northeast India, what is your best suggestion that can be taken care of at the first place? This is my first query. And at the second one, as
Can you repeat again, Vision? Vision, what?
Okay, is my audio is not coming really good?
It's a breaking. Voice is breaking. Maybe you are
Okay,
right. Maybe.
okay, sir.
Okay, just
Okay.
repeat again.
Vijen, you can post in the chat box so that I can read out.
Okay, that's also fine.
It's clear now, Vijay, and your voice is clear now. Earlier it
Okay,
was
I think that was the problem with
Yeah.
my earpiece. Sir, yeah. As Northeast India has a typical linguistic ecology. So in order to avoid the distortion from the potential, harms in the future, what is your best suggestion that we have to take care of it at the first place? This is my first query. Yeah, and the second one, yeah, unbalancing or and irregularities about the scheduled and non-scheduled languages that we can observe in the most of the Northeast states, irrespective of political factors. What is your take? Why there is an significant difference between scheduled and non-scheduled languages from the point of view as a senior linguist in this region? Thank you, sir.
Okay. First of all, the second one, even I am not happy with the, classification, scheduled languages and non-scheduled languages. I think it doesn't help. Either all languages should become scheduled languages, or there is no need of such kind of, because it often creates a kind of a psychological barrier in the mind of the people. It's not helping. I remember I have written a paper, and that paper is called the Society of Language Identity, where I have mentioned this kind of, that particular language is scheduled languages, particular language is not scheduled language, for my language is not scheduled languages. It creates, negative attitude among the speakers. So government should do something for this. Either all languages of this country should become scheduled languages, or this boundary of scheduled languages and non-scheduled language should be abolished. Okay. Now, another very important question, Bijan. Today you look so handsome. Good. Why this distortion? What? I don't think so. Let's be happy. What I'm trying to say here is that we need to understand the linguistic habitat of Northeast India in pan-Indian situation, and also in the, so basically I was trying to understand the linguistic habitat at the micro level, where diversity, divergence, and differences become important. And on the other hand, the common factors. Now, take for example Arunachal Pradesh. Am I right? Where the majority language happens to be, which language is the majority language? Do you remember, Bijan? Which language is the majority language in Arunachal Pradesh?
I have a very little knowledge about Arunachal.
Nisi or Adi?
I think both are at the forefront, sir.
Okay, yeah, both very good. And I think it's a 20 and 18%. Nisi, Adi, and so and so. No, but what has happened? If you look at the pan-Indian context, Hindi has emerged as the main contact language, the lingua franca. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to understand the pan-Indian situation. Now, the so-called, the distortion may not be a good term in the evening. So we need to have a good evening also, no? Not the bad evening. So let's be happy. Am I right? Okay. Okay,
Okay,
good,
okay,
good.
sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure being with you, and it was such an informative. I do hope all the participants, we all do gain this insight from you, sir, and thank you very much for that, sir.
So at the end, I really appreciate the effort of the team of Assam University, in particular Monali. I'm really proud of being a teacher, and and country needs energetic linguist like her. Look at, when we all are somehow afraid of this pandemic, she has come up with a new voice. I think this, her new voice, or the new voice of the team, including all of you, should be heard. And I'm sure God will bless all of you, and we are with you. That is something. We are with you whenever need comes. Please, feel free to contact us. We will be together. So again, once again, Jai Bharat, Jai Northeast. Okay, good luck.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we can move on with Dr. Wonglit Mongchan. Are you ready? Shall we start? Yes.
Yeah, can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes.
I'm
Yeah, we
audible?
can hear you.
Okay, we
Yeah,
can
it's
start.
audible. Yeah, you can please start your paper presentation.
Okay. Okay, good evening, everybody. First of all, I must thank Singh sir for such a wonderful presentations before me. And it was, for me itself, like when he was talking about Arunachal Pradesh,
Yeah.
whatever he has mentioned, I think most of the informations are well updated. And thank you for that, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Uh, my topic of today, this evening talk, is doing fieldwork and language documentation in Arunachal Pradesh. This particular topic I have just chosen because through this talk, I just wanted to highlight some of my own experience and also the overall view of this Arunachal Pradesh, in terms of language, culture, traditions, and wanted to give you in nutshell. And the whole idea of this is that some of the informations which I will be discussing, or you will see in my presentations in the PPT, those informations are some that you can't also find in many other sources. But here is just piling up all this information and giving you in totality. So to start with, next slide. Okay, so these are the important fundamental questions that we always ask ourselves, or like encounter when we talk about doing some research, or when we want to document something. So first question that it comes to our mind, or what we ask ourselves, is what to document actually. So as a linguist, we will be focusing our whole documentations or research would be on language aspect. But whether it's a language only is enough to understand the whole aspect of the community or the people who speak that particular language. Because as Sarah also was saying, like merely describing the linguistic feature will suffice, about the whole such a dynamic of language. So therefore, these are the questions that we have to really ask when we start, uh, say, venturing into field work or field study. So what I personally feel is, as a linguist, of course, our first primary objective is to understand the language from the structural or whatever different aspect of the language. But that's not only enough to understand, as I said, like to fully understand the community or the language that they use. So therefore, we should have a much more broader perspective rather than only from very localized or very restricted or limited, you know, study about the language. Now, second is how to document. That's another question that comes like, so when we talk about how to document, so it talks about different, methodologies or approaches or different perspective that we used for studying any kind of problem, any research that we undertake. So based on that, we develop different methodologies and different approaches and perspective. So understanding whole this methodologies, approaches, perspective also very important. Then third one is why to document. The other question is, okay, what to document, how to document, and now why to document, why there's a need for documentations of language or culture or anything. Now this why, the questions of why relates to like any research problems, because there's a problem we see, therefore there is a need for research, there's a need for documenting a language or culture, for so on and so forth. So these are the lapses or drawbacks or the gaps that we find in research. So therefore that enable us to understand the problem, and then accordingly we start planning our research. So that's why. Now, important thing, the last question is, in what way or how is it going to benefit the community or participants? That's the most important question that we should ask ourselves. It's not merely documenting or describing or producing some academic research work, but also to see that whether what we do or what we do, okay, what we produce, the outcome of our research, whether is it going to have any importance in the society or for the community, or whether it will benefit the participants. So these are the questions that we need to really ask. So these are very general, basic four fundamental questions that I think it's very important when we thinking to do some any kind of research for that matter. Now, next slide. Okay, now doing field work in Arunachal Pradesh. So these are some of the nature status that mostly that you can find in some of the other sources. So first of all, we understand that Arunachal Pradesh is the largest among all the northeastern state of India actually, in terms of geography. Population-wise, of course, it's not that much as compared to other states. Maybe in Northeast India, I think it's a second number. Sikkim must be the first least populated among all the northeastern state. Then to come, I think, then Arunachal. So, but geographically it's quite large. So therefore, but then across such a 83,743 square kilometer, you can see that such vast, huge land. I mean, like geographically, such a huge, vast area, and this different languages, maybe like different languages of Arunachal Pradesh, which some say like major languages. It's mostly we find when you browse the internet, you find like 26 major tribes, and so we think that only 26 languages are there. But I think this is not the right way to take it. There are many languages which are spoken across this vast area, and people are still doing research to find out like how many actual like languages are there in that, and some say it is more than like 30 languages, and there are more than 100 subgroups, or maybe like language varieties are there in Arunachal Pradesh. So these things are, we haven't actually get the exact number, because there are a lot of other issues which I'll be discussing in the later part. Now, for example, if you see that some of the language in the second slides, you can see like Anjar, for example, this is one of the district in Arunachal Pradesh, and where this particularly the so-called smaller group of language called Mayor, which is also UNESCO has, term or group under endangered languages. So Valong is one of the area where this Mayor is spoken. Now this Anjao is quite far away in the China border. And reaching there itself is a quite difficult task. Actually, in our Center for Endangered Research, we have some of our team have gone there and then did collect some data on this Mayor, and we are still working on that. But even that, going there and meeting people, collecting data, it's fine. But then finding informant or the language consultant, the community who can give you the very good data is also another kind of problem that our colleagues, some of our research team have faced. So this are for example, Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar is in Chalang district, and there's a Gandhi Gram is one of the villages where you see the Lisu. They are also called Yobin. Lisu also called. This is also one of the recently included tribes, scheduled tribe of Arunachal Pradesh. Now, to reach there, Vijayanagar, you have to walk for 2 to 3 days, 3 to 4 days on foot. I think if you have seen our chief minister, like recently when he was, having a kind of trekking, perhaps you might have seen that how it was so difficult to reach that place. And Tuting is in another one places where Kuging is one of the village under Tuting, and Tangam, for example, which we also have work, and some other foreigners also have work on this particular language. So that also is quite far, that villages and all. Laju, for example, is in Olo. It's in Tirap district. Olo is one of the so-called subgroup of Nokte so far. So like that we find. And not only that, there are languages spoken across, across the border. For example, Olo is also spoken in Myanmar, in border, but their language may be a little bit variations is always there. So these people, for example, in Lajo, when we went for documenting this particular language Olo, or sometimes they call Laju. Laju actually is a village, but they call themselves as Olo. Olo means people. So when we went there, we were told that there are also people across the border. This border is actually kind of no man's land. Am I visible? Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah, listening.
Okay,
Yeah.
So this Myanmar. So when we went there, we could not, we interacted with some people, but then, of course, we could not communicate because these people, they could not speak in either Hindi or Assamese or even in English. So therefore, there was a difficult. So there are people like Tangsa also has a lot of people in Tangsas in Myanmar, and Sangla, for example, this particularly is spoken in Arunachal, also in Bhutan, Tibet. Kasik, for example, in across this state border also there are like Kasik, which is recently we have worked. One of the beautiful language of Nokte actually, which I'll be talking later about how is it, why it is it's not separate and under come under Nokte. So this is Hiloni, there's Hiloni Gaon under Sibsagar district in Assam. So this particular, they are very old people. They say like they were driven out from that Tirap area in those area, and they settled down in Hiloni Gaon in Sibsagar district, Assam, and they also speak like Kasik. But how there are some kind of variations because they have already lived with Assamese people already. So it is good to see also like the Kasik of like the Tirap district or Arunachal Pradesh and the Kasik of like Assam. So that kind of comparative study is also important to look at. Now, the last one is, yes, of course, it's quite a challenging job to start with working with people whom you have never met. And so people who speak different language, culture, lifestyle. Here is everywhere it's like that. Even Nagaland, Mizoram, wherever you go, to the new places, then you find different people, different language, different, lifestyle, different, everything is different, but still we survive as a linguist. Now, can you go back a little bit? Yeah, so this is the linguistic diversity, which Sarah has already discussed in Arunachal Pradesh. You can see, like, I've just mentioned a few, like, why not only having 26 or more than 26 language, but within that also there are so many varieties. For example, Adi, sorry, that's a 14 actually, that's a mistake. Oh, I think yeah, there's a 14th, yeah. 14 varieties Adis has. Nishi, at least now, they say that they have 3 varieties. Galo, 4 varieties. Nocte, 5 varieties. Maybe more than that. Still, Tangsa, some say like is more than 30. And for example, Stephen Moreno, they gave 20 subgroups and other 11 subgroups like that. And Wancho at least has 2 varieties, at least upper Wancho, lower Wancho. And they differ. Not drastically, but then at least, and then Mismi, at least they have 3 varieties. So like that, you have so many varieties of language. And the concept of endangered and lesser known language also part of this Arunachal Pradesh, the way we find some languages are either endangered or they are sometimes not known much by the people. Like, for example, Tangam, which has been worked, as I said, we are also working. Our centers also have worked. We have produced 1 book on that Tangam. And then other foreigners, I think Mark Post also has worked on that, the grammatical stage of this Tangam. Milang, same thing. People have worked on that. And then Asing is also a Adi language. Mayor, Olo, Kasik, Na, for example, Na is under Tagin actually. It's been, but it has some different variety of language. Sartang, Bangru, again, Bangru comes under Nishi, but then ethnically, they are very close to Nishi, but then various, in terms of linguistic structure, they are more or less similar to Miji rather than the Nishi. But then many, they have assimilation due to assimilations, a lot of lexical, this merging has already taken place. Of course, this documented, undocumented, there are documented languages also there. There are undocumented languages still that you find in Arunachal Pradesh, especially when we talk about those dialects or the varieties language. Those are minor subgroups. They haven't so far been documented. Only the major in terms of population, those language where more populations that they have been to work on. Now, another interesting thing is like oral literature, folklore, which is a part of language, actually, as I said, like that, because so this hasn't been touched much, and it's a very interesting area to look into that. But there are, for example, myth, folk tales. There are different variants you will find, and but then especially here, folk songs, proverbs are sometimes they are very, we call it very stable. I mean, like they don't actually, in terms of they don't have a variation actually. But in folk tales, you'll find variations. Myth also there are variations. Folk songs are very, there's not much variations that you find. But at the same time, it's very difficult to, translate, because we have been collecting some of the folk tales, especially the folk songs. And I have been guiding some of my MPhil students who are working on some folk songs, folk tales, and this and that. So we find it very difficult sometimes to have, kind of word to word or word for word or very literal translations of those texts, especially the folk proverbs, also very difficult, challenging they are. So sometimes it quite, but then these are the very rich area where we can look into that apart from the language. Now, this is next slide. This is the overall view of the language. Next slide. Okay, so this is a district-wise distribution. I just made it for you all to really see, like, these are the language that is spoken in different districts of Arunachal Pradesh. Now, Arunachal has its new districts are coming up day by day, every year. I mean, like year after year. So it was 4 districts in earlier, but now it has 25 districts now total. So in each of this district, some district you will find very specific, only one single tribe and you're inhabiting that particular district. In some, they will see that mixed tribe, two, three tribes, and in some only one single tribe you find. Anjao, you see, for example, first one, Digaru Mismi, you will find there Miju Mishmi, Mayor. They are, by the way, Mayor and Jakring are the same. Recently they have come together, okay? And then this you can see, and but the lowest young Leparada, all Galo. These are you can see like different. So for you to see, like, I make it easy for all of us. Now, and come. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, next slide. This you can see. Yeah. Now, this is the classification actually of natural languages, which you find in net. Also, you find that Blanche, Mark, and all they have given. Like, so there are around 7, 8 languages that like come across. So these are the tentative classification. There may be more or maybe different. So you can see like Buddhist language, Sal languages, Tani, Mishmi, and then you have Rousseau, Tai Kadai. Lesser known languages are Shadukpen, Koro, Mizi, and all those. Isolates also, they say that there are some isolate languages like Tangam, Milang, and all those that they talk about. Now next, this other roughly. Now, some of the issues which I will be talking about, that what is happening in Arunachal Pradesh. This is the whole issue which some of the issues, not whole, about the language, the communication.
Wonglit, your voice is not audible.
Hello.
Your
can you hear
voice
me
is not audible. Yeah.
No, can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Hello.
Please go ahead. Yeah, please go
okay,
ahead.
okay.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Okay, fine. So these are some of the issues and challenges that we come across or that are there in Arunachal Pradesh, but not whole, but some few important issues that I'm just going to talk about. Now, language shift is something which is happening as we see. We know like Arunachal Pradesh is actually, by nature, all of us, most of us are multilingual actually. We can speak Hindi, Assamese, and English, and our mother tongues. These are the 3, 4, like at least 3, 4 languages and one person at least can speak. But sometimes this multilingual is also, it's a problem in the sense like some of us, especially for the young people, younger generations, and mostly educated people, if you see, then multilingual, though it is a blessing, it is a need of the time, but at the same time, it's a cause of our own mother tongue. For example, in university, what I often see is like here, mostly we speak Hindi. Back home, of course, you have your own mother tongue. But when you move out of your home, then you are faced with different, people who speak different languages. And there you interact either with Hindi or English or Assamese. Now, in that process, we lost our own, language. And when we go back home, then we are not able to really continue what we have been before we move out of our hometown. So this is happening in the young people. For example, even I see that among Nishi guys or Nishi, some of the boys here in the school, in the college or university, they speak Hindi very fluently rather than their mother tongue. They don't use it. So this trend is going on in everywhere. So influence of major languages is one of the most challenging thing that is happening across, across maybe India itself, and mostly in northeast state of India. So this is one of the things. And next one is issue of scripts. there are languages which have a script, and there are languages which do not have their own scripts. And some of the scripts that we find is the Bodic script, Liktai script. Bodic is used by those Mahayanas, like Mompa, those Buddhist, those group. They use this Bodic script. Liktai is used by Khamti, Thai Kadai group. Wancho is a very recent script which has been already used by the Wanchos. Tani Lipi, though it was meant for this Tani group of people, but it is nowhere seen like being used by the people, because most of so far I know, Nishi, Apatani, Adi, Galo, these four major biggest group among the Tanis, they are using this modified Roman script. So this Tani script, which was meant for them, I can't be seen anywhere. So it's in oblivion somewhere. So how far it will be applicable for them, that's not sure. But then there are other languages who are also using this Roman script. But this Assamese Devanagari script, I haven't seen. Like, so far, I have not come across any language using this two script. So there are languages, and the script is one challenging issue, like to develop a script. And everyone is trying. Even the government also, thinking towards that direction to have a common script for all those different languages group. But having common script is, again, it's a difficult to have, because, for example, those languages which they have been using this Bodic script, they won't shift to that. And Wancho script, which is newly created, so they will never, because the issue of script is also something connected to identity, because they want, because you have a different script, so you are different from others. So therefore you are totally having, so that connect to identity issue. So nowadays, people are thinking in that direction. Script is a part of identity, to have a different script around distinct script. Now, second issue of identity is another challenging. Here, why I'm saying here is that, for example, in Arunachal Pradesh, merging of smaller speech communities, are very common within the numerically larger tribes. For example, as I said, Tanga, Milang, which some of the foreign scholars has mentioned that they're distinct. They're different from the so-called their Adis as such, but still they come under Greater Adi, because they are culturally, maybe ethnically, they are it's different, but then it's come under Tagin, which is they themselves said it's different, but it comes under Nishi. For example, as I said, Olo, Kasik, they are clubbed under Nokte. But as we got to know from our own research that this language is also a bit different, because my own personal experience with these people, I can't understand, neither they understand me. There are some lexical items which are similar, but then when they start talking or conversing in their own mother tongue, then I don't understand what they're saying. So these things are happening, but still they are, since culturally they are part of Nokte, Greater Nokte, so-called, so therefore they come under. And classify, unclassified, still there are going on, their research are going on to see that whether there is a language other than what has been clubbed under those different group under those, which has been already done by the people, to see whether their language isolates, for example. There's speculations or their postulations is always there, there are some more than that. So we need to do more research. Now, one of the important things is that since the language, whatever we document, whatever we develop, or whatever we do a linguistic study, is ultimately for use, like so that people can use it. Because if you don't use it, then it just die off because it can't survive when we don't use the language. So therefore, when we talk about implementation or introduction of these local languages in school, it's another challenging issue. I have attended some few meetings of the with the state government, education department and all, like to see that how this different indigenous language can be introduced in the school, at least to basic level. Some have succeeded, some are still, pondering what to do. Because for some of those languages have been still unworked because there's no proper grammar written on this particular language. So therefore, they can't use it in schools now. Even those languages which are part of these education systems are also actually mostly of these major languages. So called those languages, those varieties where you find numerically bigger in numbers. So those languages have been, but then those numerically smaller groups have been neglected. So the question of which variety should be used is the most challenging thing when we talk about implementation or introduction of local languages in schools. These are the important. So some of the issues. Now, last is the last. Can you go to? Now, what should be done? So first thing, as I said, like I stressed in the very beginning, what we have as a linguist, we of course have to document the language, but not only language, but also the oral traditions, not only of the major languages, major linguistic group, but also the minor linguistic, not only of the bigger group within the same group, but smaller linguistics within the group. So that's very important. So we can't just neglect. Every language is important for us, whether small or big. Now, second one is very important, is like everybody knows, I mean, like as we are, all of us researchers, we have been working, and some of you are of course much more senior than many of us who have produced a lot of research works, and better. But I just wanted to put it here is like, especially when we talk about in Arunachal Pradesh, everything becomes very sensitive. Tomorrow, suppose I'm talking now, I'm giving a kind of presentation here. If I say something which is maybe didn't like by the community, then they they will oppose it. So in terms of language also, it's like that. Suppose you do something, then if people doesn't agree with them, then you have to retract. So therefore, to avoid those things from the very beginning, it's very important that we involve the indigenous people, the native people, like CBOs, like especially the community-based organizations, the local leaders, like any representative of that area, of that tribe. And church leaders also very important part of that, student community, and any other people who are actively involved in that language preservations. Not only during the course of research or in the process of documentation, but also later part, we have to involve, because whatever we do, whatever research we do has to be verified by the people for whom we have done. So therefore, we need feedback from them. So we have to involve them so that they know like what we are doing, whether what we are doing, whether it's justified or authentic research work, that whether we are doing it or not. So those things, let the people decide, let the people, support. That is what we really need as researchers. Now, the third one is like, it's not only the community or the researchers alone can really see the light of the day. It's when, unless until there's an involvement, active participation of the stakeholders and policymakers, especially the government support and intervention is very much required. As Sir was talking about attitude, change of attitude, it's very important. And from my own experience, in 2005, there was a meeting in a banquet hall in Arunachal Pradesh. about the introduction of local script, development of script and introduction of local languages in school. So where CIL, some of the people from CIL also came in. There was a Secretary of Education in during that time. There was Secretary of Education. In his inaugural speech, he was completely, he didn't agree about this in introduction of local languages in schools, because his attitude towards this local language was completely negative. It was so different. He thinks that why do you need, because he said, like, why do you need local languages when the world is, moving towards, those language which are widely spoken in the world. Why you want to restrict yourself? How it's going to help you? So that his attitude towards that local languages. So therefore, later part we could not really formulate. So it is there. So therefore, very important to win the what we call, like, to convince those people. Also to win the confidence of those people is very important. We can't help, because we can't just keep what we do in the cupboard, but we have to bring. So therefore, we need these people, stakeholder policymakers, and with them, with community, then we can do. We have a data. As a researcher, we can produce all this language, we can document everything. Now, community has to support, and this policymaker, state government has to intervene. Then only everything, and then only our work will be successful at the end. Now, last one is very important. Why I said it's a very common quotations, like of the people, for the people, and by the people. Now we know that whatever work is of the people, whether language or oral traditions, whatever research work we do, of the people. Now, so therefore, we have to give back to them. So therefore, let the work or research work, or let the outcome be for the people, and so that people can use them. By people, let them use. By the people, let them use. So it's of the people, for the people, and by the people. So we have to give them back. What we do, give them back. That is what we do. And they feel really good when you give them back something, because they love to see. So at the end, I would say that our whole objective of research is not merely from academic point of view, but from social point of view also we should have to look at. With this, I think, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wang Li, for such a fascinating presentation, and it's very interesting. And from the participants, we have some time, we can take some questions, any query.
Okay, can I come in?
Yes.
Okay, Wang Li,
yes, Namaste. How are you?
I'm good. It's a very interesting talk. So I want to ask a few questions, since you have been documenting the languages. And there are so many kind of technologies or tools are coming up for the documentation. So what kind of tools or method did you apply while documentation? This is one question. And another one is, did you find any difference between the language documentation and language documentation, or description of this documentation? Description of language documentation and language documentation.
Description of language documentation, and what do you say? Language?
And one is language documentation. Yeah, there are two types. So can you please differentiate between these two? And another question is, I want to ask Sir Selendra Kumar, because I want to ask, because of some time factors, I do not ask. So I want to ask to Sir, is that this majority group dominant the minority ones in their identity, the language, or politically, socially? So what kind of step or measurements should be taken in this situation, especially in Northeast? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Regarding those tools and techniques, all right.
Yes.
Okay. Tools and techniques
Yeah,
are.
You can give the answer for my question also, no? That's very good. Your presentation was very good. I like that. And you can combine the answer and you are capable of giving that. Huh? Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. See, about the linguistic data, for example. Okay. We didn't for collection of especially the data. All right. So we didn't only limited ourselves to that particular any like methods or say like select tools, but for example, linguistic descriptive studies questionnaires, which are based on like given by the Bernard Comrie, which we call lingual descriptive studies questionnaires. And also we have taken from the manual of linguistic fieldwork questionnaires, some of the things, and spell, for example, which has been used by the spell. And then Mark Post also they have used by some questionnaires, sets of questionnaires, and SIL Internationals, like Summer Institute of Linguistic International. Those are the like some of the questionnaires which we follow from those existing questionnaires which has been framed by different people, scholars earlier. So with the help of that questionnaires, we collected some of this linguistic data. All right, and apart from that, other tools, of course, interview. All right, interview methods, observations methods. These are the different methods that, because we have to not only collecting the linguistics data, but also we also concentrated on some of the like top on like culture aspect also we have collected. So therefore, observations methods, we are also some of the we through observation methods also we try to collect data. All right, and other like instruments that we use, of course, there's a very common like we have been using, which you also have your, I think your center also must be using some of those other, but some of the technologies like a flex, we have some of for example, one of our for like what is our research scholar, Avant, Chiru Avant. He has been doing on compiling the dictionary. So he used Flex for that particular compiling of dictionary. So mostly, as I said, like we used in terms of questionnaires, very basic. We didn't have a much expertise on that advanced technology. It's very more or less a traditional. In overall very traditional. We as a first thing we prepared questionnaires, taking from all those different questionnaires developed by these different previous scholars. That is first thing. And then we go to the field, and with all different instruments that we have, we interview people, we record people, we record the data. Then also we participate in the different activities, such as maybe the culture festivals or any other, like which we want to collect data. As I said, therefore, participation, observation was one of our approaches, our methodology that we used. And technical aspect, of course, there's a different way of doing things. I think that
yeah. Temsu also raised his hand, so Temsu, please go ahead.
Yeah, Wally, thank you for the overview of languages. Given the complexity of languages in
yes,
Arunachal, I think that was a very good good overview. I just had a question regarding researchers coming into Arunachal to work. So what you've already, I think, discussed some of the
Yeah,
issues and
yes. Last time
challenges.
you.
Yeah, but again, more with regard to the attitude of what kind of attitude can we expect? Like researchers from outside of Arunachal, so maybe students from Assam or from other states. What can we expect for
Okay.
research purposes? Yeah.
Actually, of course, there's a if you are belong to that particular language group, then that's of course one of the best way. But since researchers are not always from that particular area of belonging to that particular say community, so there are also coming from outside, even the foreigners, they come and all. So here in Arunachal Pradesh, as far as I'm concerned, there are many people. Like, for example, there's one Assamese guy who has worked on, who is doing some in Thailand, some master degree he did, and under Scott Delancey, I think. He worked on Nocte, the small grammatical sketch, recently, very dissertations. So he was also like very happily, I mean, like he went to the field, and of course, but then we need to have known people. For example, I'm here, for example, for anybody who wants to do research on languages of Arunachal Pradesh, I'm here, for example. So you need to develop a contact with a known person, like a snowball type, no? You roll. Try to first find at least the person, the close contact, and then from that you can develop an other contact. So in that way, it can be done first thing. Now, people here, of course, they always welcome people from outside, and especially those who are in academic field, they have more weightage. I mean, like this whole attitude is always there. If you are in positions like you are working in a university or colleges, such area, and then people give more additional attentions, extra care. So that's also truth, actually. So there's not much problem as such. Anybody, everyone is welcome. But only thing is that, as I said, like in the beginning, we should have at least pilot survey of that area, what exactly how people are there, and to start with that, have first contact with the person whom you know. Then everything will be done, because through that we can develop. I think otherwise, overall, there is no problem actually. Only there are, as I said, like there may be some. Once you start working with the people, then you may come across some small issues, but then that can be solved. It depends on person to person, actually. Research from researcher to researcher, like how you interact, how you deal with people.
Thank you.
I hope I make sense something.
Okay, Wanglit,
We can discuss.
one more questions from Bijain. Yes, Bijain, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Wanglet, for that overview presentation of language documentation in Arunachal. My query is very simple.
Yes, thank you.
Just want to know that the number of language spoken in Arunachal. So we got information from internet and other sources like this and that. But in your one of the slide, what I have seen was RD having 14 kind of varieties, and other languages also the same thing.
Yeah.
So how, when we count the major languages, how do you do? Are you taking this variety as well, or are they only as such a language? Yeah, that is my point.
No, these varieties are not counted as such. They come under one RD, because whatever varieties we have listed out, all right, For example, Nocte has 5 varieties, but all come under Nocte. For example, there is no Nocte as such. If I have to suppose, if I have to say, there is no Nocte language as such actually.
Okay.
So-called. There are different varieties. For example, there are Hava, Keppa, which is called Kasik, Olo, Tang, Potung. And there may be more. Within Potung also, there are a lot of variations are there. So these 5. Now, which one is Nocte actually? That's a question.
Okay. Then can we interpret like Nocte as an umbrella term for representing all those varieties?
Adi, Nishi, they are all same like umbrella term, like which have been used.
Okay.
Because as I said, like Galo, for example, Galo has 4 varieties. They call it Lare, Kodu, Karka, Hugo, like that. Galo, for example. So, but then how far they are different from each other, that's the question that we have to investigate. Tangsa, for example, many say like there are more than 30 varieties. But then are they really, distinct from each other, or is there like something similar that we have to see? So
okay, like Adi,
the,
Nocte, Tangsa is also considered as the umbrella term which covers
Tangsa,
so many varieties. Oh,
yeah.
I got the point. Okay.
Yeah. So Vancho, for example, Vancho is 1. Miss Me is 1. You do Miss Me. Like that.
But when we count, or when you give an information about the such number of languages spoken in Arunachal, then which language you're considering, or which language is representing Nocte, Adi? It's really a confusing thing, no? I think so then.
Absolutely. So therefore, what happened is, like, for example, tomorrow when somebody asks me to develop a script, or maybe like to write a grammar which has to be suppose like let's say like introduction of Nocte in school. Now, which language to introduce in the school? Whether Hava, whether Kappa, whether Olo, Tang, or Potung. Now, question comes. Now, this will depend on the people. Like, for example, within that Nocte, so-called 5 varieties, there are some groups which are, say, like population-wise, much more, or maybe in terms of affluent, like in terms of more privileged people or more educated people. So in that way, that particular variety will be given preference over the rest. Similarly, is happening in other group also.
Okay. In case if they are intelligible to each other, then I think there must be a variety which can be considered as the standard for among these varieties, now to represent Nocte or Adi, whatever.
Yes, that is true. That can be possible. But only thing is, when there is a mutually not intelligible, then the question comes. But then they are always clubbed as one. For example, Tutsa was once upon a time, it was under Nocte, but they came out of Nocte. Now another one is Olo is trying to come out of Nocte, but government hasn't approved it. Olo. So like that.
Yeah.
Keep on like changing.
Yeah, thank you. I got it. Okay, thank you for explanation. Thank you.
Okay, welcome, sir.
Vidini, Vidini, you can continue the question to Sir Salendra. Yes, please repeat your questions once
we'll
again.
talk.
Yes, Vidini, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I think he got my answer question. I mean.
Okay, so we'll wait the answer from Salendra, sir. Okay, sir.
I think it's a very complex question regarding minority and majority language.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it is very difficult to define also in Indian context. One language which is majority language in one state becomes minority language in another state. Take for example, if we say Hindi is a majority language, which is the killer language for many Indian languages, but in Bengal, Bengali happens to be the majority language, which is a killer language for many other languages. And even in a state like Manipur, I mean, Meitei happens to be the majority language. So how do people conceive that? So it's a very trivial and complex question that needs to be debated. But the point here is, especially in Northeast Indian context. And I really appreciate the Bangla for such a nice presentation, who was talking about Arunachal Pradesh, and and the question which was raised by uh, the Bijan. It was very complex, and it is very difficult for anyone to give concrete answer. Uh, but the one thing which is very important to resolve this issue is to ask how Northeast, a speech community, conceive and represent their heteroglossic repertoire.
Very true, very
And
true. That's true, sir.
I mean, we have to ask. Uh, Take for example, I will give example of you know mm, the notion of mutual intelligibility among Simte, Gangte, and Baife, and so on and so forth. Now, these languages are now separate languages, but some of them are mutually intelligible. So it's up to people to decide how to decide, the heteroglyphic situation. But one has to understand that Gampaj has also talked about, and he had introduced the term interactional perspective, and which is very true in Indian context. So in which language, in which variety people interact with whom, how, where, and how. So if these questions are answered, maybe we will get answer. But uh, it's very difficult to decide which language is minority language and which language is majority language. Now, for example itself, Hindi has more than 52 varieties. Once upon a time, Maithili was considered as one of the varieties or the dialects of Hindi. Now it has become the scheduled languages. So what do we do? Uh, so it's a very complex situation. In Indian context. In Indian context, as many questions you pose, you will start enjoying, and and it is very difficult to give concrete answer. To sum up and to make all of you happy, maybe we are entering into a new era, and it's a call Naya Daur. And I remember there was a very famous song. Babita, can you hear me?
Yes, sir,
Hello.
very much, sir. You can hear.
Babita,
Yes, sir, I
there
can
was
hear
a
you.
very famous song.
Yeah.
There was a very famous song in film, Naya Daur, Saathi Haath Badhana, Ek Akela Thak Jayega, So here is a very complex situation, but happy situation in Indian context. Even if we miss one language, we take up in another one. So there is no communication breakdown as such. And that is the strength of the Indian multilingualism, which is always embedded. I think Temsu will like this term, embedded multilingualism, because keep on something. It's not something the negative, but the something positive comes in. But at the end, a speech community has to be in the center, and a speech community, how language is conceived and represented in heteroglossic repertoire, that has to be taken into consideration. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I think now we have covered all of our questions. So before I think I would just like to thanks once again that we remain very much obliged to our Professor Sailendra Kumar Singh for giving us such an extremely an informative and um, enlightening new issues, new concepts, which we have been received by listening with you, and with such insights, sir. It's very helpful to us all, and I do hope like we will also try our best which you want us to come in that right way. Thank you very much, sir. And also, thanks goes to Dr. Wang Lit for such a fascinating and wonderful presentations in his concepts with that of the Arunachal Pradesh, the languages being spoken there, how to document and all. And once again, we would like to thank all the participants who have actively participated and very patiently with us for all these long hours. And thank you once again from my side. Now over to Monali. Yes.
Thank you, Babita Madam, for chairing this session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Popita, for chairing the session and also for the smooth conduct of the entire session. Once again, huge thank you to our plenary speaker, Professor Shailendra Kumar Singh, for his very interesting talk on the linguistic habitat of Northeast India, and also to Dr. Wang Lit for also extending the challenges of language documentation, especially for languages of Arunachal Pradesh. And thank you to all once again for patiently and consistently sitting the whole day and being here for this evening session as well. Tomorrow we're going to start the session at 10 a.m. and tomorrow's session will be on language documentation. Hope to see you all tomorrow in the morning session as well. And thank you to all. And this is the end of the session. And yeah, good evening and good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Manali.